Hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be my guide for Tazavesh Solia's Gambit in or within Season 3 Mythic Plus. So this is another one of the new old dungeons coming back to us. There's like a ethereal theme in Season 3 War Within, and this is Tazavesh definitely fits the theme. So we'll start off in a Murloc heavy area. And once we pull all the mobs, we'll pause the video and go over what all of them do as is tradition. So there is these Fishmancers that cast Water Bolt at a random person. Unlike every other spam caster in the game, the Water Bolt does actually have a cooldown, so if you interrupt it, it will not start casting again. If you do it at stop, it will actually recast, but interrupts put it on cooldown for a decent amount of time. I think you can duo interrupt each one. There are also these Shell Crushers that hit the tank. They also have a cast at 50% called Cry of a Murgle, which will give all Murlocs near them 100% increased damage. So the game is kind of balanced around this actually going off. So before 100%, the Murlocs don't really do that much damage, especially to the tank. Obviously, random water bolts going off will hurt people, especially when overlapped with the Colossus. Or with the Coastwalker Goliath. So the Goliath has two abilities. Number one, there was a random boulder on the ground, as you can see here. Dodge that. Also, there's a bunch of these swirlies from the Fishmancers dropping pufferfish. Dodge those too. And he also casts the AoE Stomp, I think it's called. I forget what it's called. Tidal Stomp. This does AoE damage. Uh, Obviously, just use a personal when it hits you. This used to stack up before in Shadowlands. They have removed that mechanic. Every single one does the same damage now. It used to do like more damage every time it hit you. So there was like a DPS check to kill this guy. There is still like a DPS check because you have to kill this guy to time the key. But there is no rush to actually kill him or you'll die to Tidal Stomps. It just does the same damage every time now. There is also this fish stick, which is spawned by the scale binder. So this fish stick is it is no longer a totem. They changed that after massive player feedback. You can actually kill these now. So the scale binder does not have a cast time on fish stick. Before in Shadowlands, what would happen is he would start casting fish stick, and then someone had to stop him from casting it, and he would not recast it. So, and if a fish stick ever actually spawned in Shadowlands, it was basically just GG, go next key. Uh, they have changed this, so now the fish stick just always spawns, no matter what, unless you like stun him and literally kill him in the stun. But right now, it just always spawns. But it is no longer a totem. You can actually kill the stick. So usually, what we'll do, especially in the first pull of the dungeon where everyone has lust and all cooldowns, we'll pull the mobs on top of the fish stick and just AoE it with everything else. While it is out, it is giving damage reduction to all of the Murlocs near it and healing them. So definitely prioritize getting rid of this thing. Alternatively, if it's like the last mob in the pull or something, you can kite away from it or kill the Scalebinder. If you kill the Scalebinder, then the fish stick despawns. One other thing to note about the start of this dungeon is that these Murlocs all have everyone's favorite mechanic. When they're low health, they start running away. So you need to tank the pull away from other packs, otherwise they can walk into other packs, and then suddenly, your group may not be able to deal with all the bolts, or it gets pull extra skill binders, which pull more fish sticks, which heal everything. So these Murlocs kind of need to be pulled in like a controlled manner. I would say you definitely don't want to be fighting too many, and at the same time, you don't want to be fighting too few. Otherwise, you're going to be moving throughout the dungeon too slowly. So every pull basically is usually measured in this area. In this particular scenario, by the way, there are 4 water bolters that are living a very long time, and we're not really doing a proper AoE stop rotation, so that's why our healer died there. Also, I think it is probably worth prioritizing down this scale binder. I said the fish sticks were easier to deal with after the changes, but they're still gonna make the pull take longer. As you can see, it's healing all the Murlocs and giving them damage reduction. So yeah, make sure you deal with the scale binder quickly, and obviously the Coastwalker Goliath has the most health, so he also needs to die. So in this pull, I think I'm trying to execute the other tactic, which is to spawn the fish sticks and walk away, since we don't have as strong cooldowns. So here we spawn the fish sticks, and now I'm trying to move the pack all the way away from the fish sticks. This is basically the distance that you have to be away. So both tactics work, especially at the start of the season, though. In lower keys, I expect most people to just kill the fish stick and call it a day. It's going to have not that much health at all because the key is going to be very low, and that'll be it. All right, after this pull, I like to do a pull in here. Since any of these other pulls, if you can't really be moved outside of the area, or they can ninja pull. I do a pull here with some Murlocs and the Coastwalker Goliath. Some Shorerunners will also patrol into us. This is basically the same pull. All the mobs in here we've already covered. I am using a third tactic here for the skill binder, so we've developed many tactics for these skill binders. So in the first pull, remember we had lust and everything, so I kind of just stacked on top of the skill binder. Unfortunately, the skill binder lived, so it cast a bunch of fish sticks, which is why the pull took forever. In the second pull, we spawned 2 fish sticks and then walked away. In this pull, we're going to use another tactic, which we honestly probably should have used in the first tactic, or in the first pull rather. So the fish stick spawns about 5 seconds in. So if you stun him 4 seconds in, then he will not cast the fish sticks until the stun is over. So I do my Storm Bolt into a half cap, and then after that, he will spawn the fish stick. So we're delaying the fish stick to spawn. As you can see, by the time it actually spawns, he's already at 75%. If we had done this in the first pull, he might have even been pushed into his like fleeing health range. We might not even had a fish stick to begin with. So that's another thing you can do with the fish stick, especially if you have bigwigs cooldowns on nameplates. You can see it's pretty accurate with the fish stick spawn timer. If it's like at 1 second, you can just stun, and then they'll delay the fish stick's cast by however long that is. Obviously, we're not too coordinated right now since this is on PTR, and what's killing people is the water bolt going off with the Coastwalker Goliath Stomp. That is a very dangerous combo. Alright, so there is also another tactic that you can do with fish stick. Because, by the way, the reason we came with all these tactics is because the fish stick, until the most recent PTR patch, was counted as a totem, which meant the killing it tactic, which is what everyone is probably going to do, was not really viable. Another tactic you can do, which we're not employing here, is you can CC the skill binders before you start the pull. And then, honestly, we probably should have done it here, and then bring it into a pull with no Murlocs. So in the first area, every pull has Murlocs, but since this is the last pull of the first area, we could technically CC these and bring them to the boss, or just into the next pull where there are no Murlocs and you can just completely ignore the fish stick. We're kind of just like testing out on PTR right now, so we're just not CCing them because that is obviously the best tactic in my opinion, and seeing if we can kill through and not have to worry about all that. Anyway, these Guardians, I think, are the same as Shadowlands. Nothing has really changed. So they do an AoE, which makes all the melee run out, which the melee are all going to hate. And they do this crackle. Standing in this, by the way, as it's going off, does nothing. It's basically just ground denial. You can stand in it the whole time. Discharge Pulse is what melee are going to hate. You basically just have to run out. Unless you're a tank, you can stay in. I think if you pop every cooldown in the game as a DK, you can honestly probably stay in too as a DPS DK. But yeah, there's 4 of them, so if you stand in one and then have to run out of the next one, doesn't really help. We are going to be pulling this with the boss since this is PTR with a bunch of people who've been playing it, a lot. On live, especially early in the season, I do not recommend doing this. Just kill the Goliaths or get them at least to like very low and then pull into boss. You should probably coordinate too beforehand because some people are going to expect you to pull this into boss. Definitely just say what you're doing before this if you're not pulling into boss, or if you are. So people know what's going on. A lot of DPS are also like super ethical. As you can see here, while we're pulling towards the boss, no one is using cooldowns, right? We're all intentionally have our cooldowns on cooldown before the boss is pulled. Then once we're in the boss room, people are still not using cooldowns. Okay, well, Supreme is using cooldowns, I guess. But ideally, you're not using cooldowns on these until the boss is pulled, because technically once the boss is pulled, the only thing that changes the timer of the dungeon is doing damage to the boss. Anyway, I do pull the boss because I see Arcane CDs are up. If Arcane CDs weren't up, I would probably just hit these a little bit longer. Since Arcane CDs up, we're pulling the boss. Dealing with these while you're fighting the boss, by the way, is quite challenging, especially early in the season. I can't say this enough. I don't recommend doing this unless you are, with a very practiced group. So now we'll actually go over the boss mechanics. We're going to go back to where the boss is actually pulled. So we pull the boss. And the first thing he does is Purifying Burst. So this has been changed since the Shadowlands. This used to just randomly pick 2 people, no indicator, and just hit them. And it could also pick pets. Now, as you can see, there are 3 arrows above people's heads, and it is not picking any pets. These 3 people are the people it's picking. It is kind of a one-shot check, so if you're like a squishy, make sure you use something on this. So after the debuff runs out, it goes off, bang. That's the damage it does. And there's also Purged by Fire, which is going to go out soon, I think. You can see it. You kind of saw it off screen. It picked the mage there. And he's being fixated by this line, and this line draws this little yellow thing on the ground. If you run over this, you're dead. If you run into the line, you are dead. It is very unforgiving, this beam. I've seen many, many melee die to it. Make sure you are fully respecting the mechanic. In my opinion, especially as a melee, the best way to deal with this is to run out as soon as you get picked. So the starting point of the line is here, and then as soon as like it appears, you just use like whatever gap closer you have to get back to the boss, and the line will draw like from this line to the boss, which is fine. One thing you do not want to do with this line is cover these circles or cover the middle of the room, because that's generally where people want to be playing the boss. As for the boss itself, it also has 2 other mechanics. So one is Shearing Swings, which is just a tank hit. You know, make sure you have mitigation up for all of them. And he also does a frontal, which we saw earlier. I'll like backpedal to it. Here it is. Called Titanic Crash. Boom. Obviously, just dodge. It's not that hard compared to other mechanics, but it can be difficult if you're fighting all of these storm guards, which are also doing ground denial with all the crackles and the circles, and someone also has a beam. If you put it in the wrong spot, you know, someone could easily get caught by it and die. Next, we'll talk about the ads that the boss spawns. So while you're fighting this boss, especially with trash on top, the ads can get confusing. They usually spawn on each side of the room. Also, if you're a tank, getting aggro on the far one is kind of important. And it's also kind of annoying if you're fighting it with storm guards. Basically, you need to pull this one with taunt and then hit this one, the close one, with some AoE skill usually. They do have aggro, and they have 2 main abilities. So number 1 is called Empowered Defenses. So the way this works is kind of unlike a lot of other casts. Well, it works similar to other casts, but it doesn't show. It doesn't. The display is kind of weird. So you can see he's counting down this channel for 2 seconds. Once this resolves, it doesn't resolve. So we'll see. We'll see on this one what happens. So ideally, you let it finish casting this. Boom. So it's finished casting, and now it's casting on the boss. You can see he has this debuff here. This debuff basically means he's taking 50% damage. So you want them to just finish the first cast, and then you stop it so it goes on cooldown. You can see there, I waited for the cast to finish and then shockwave. So it doesn't recast it. If you just like stop it while it's before this is done, then it'll recast it and you have to spam AoE stops instead of just doing one. The other thing that it does is Valorous Bolt. It does a decent amount of damage. I don't think it's a one-shot on most people, but if they take any other damage, they'll probably die. Obviously, you know, just kick. You can reflect it as a warrior also, but don't expect your DPS to be paying attention to that. There's the Valorous Bolt. It goes off on the mage. Bang. Does a decent chunk of damage. And there is a decent amount of... There is like a real DPS check requirement on these. If they're alive in intermission, you'll cast Keeper's Protection on, you know, these consoles. And that makes it so you basically can't progress the boss fight. So you do need to eventually kill them. So they also changed this intermission from the Shadowlands. So basically, the idea is the same. Everyone needs to pick up one of these balls and bring it to the correct console, and someone is going to channel up here. So before, in Shadowlands, this was not visible. You could, like, you can see how, like, yellow's top left, blue's top right. This was not visible. You could have to, like, either use a weak aura, or your healer have to tell you in voice or type it in chat. Now you can just look, you know, with your eyes and see what it is. So I see yellow top left. I have the yellow one. I go to the top left console and put it in. And then everyone else, you know, goes to whatever whatever console is correct. And the boss leaves the intermission. By the way, in the intermission, he is immune to damage, and he will very, very slowly fill the room with poop. So you need to take care of this, you know, eventually. But I don't think anyone has ever run into that issue, because you want to take care of it immediately anyway, so you can go back to hitting the boss. Anyway, after that, the boss fight kind of just repeats. I believe the first phase is shorter than the rest of the phases, because he starts with a certain amount of energy, and he goes into the phase when he gets full energy. As you can see here, I wait for the cast to fully finish and then do an AoE stop. The other one, I think they didn't do it properly, so it recasted. So yeah, you want to wait for the cast to finish and then do the stop. One way to take advantage to like assign people to these ads is usually as the tank, I take care of the one that the boss spawns on top of, and then I let everyone else take care of the other one. Most tanks, I think, have some way to deal with this. Like Bear, you can in-cap roar every 30 seconds. Warrior has, a myriad number of ways. Paladin has 30-second Hodge, etc. Most tanks can actually do that, solo one of them, and then everyone else in the group can surely figure out a way to deal with the other one. Just make sure you do wait for this cast to actually finish before you stop them. The weird part is that they don't actually show that they're casting once it's finished. But that is actually when they want to be when you want to stop them. If you stop them early, then they'll just recast, and obviously we went over why that's bad. But if this part is not stopped, the one that has like no cast bar, while they're channeling on the boss, then he is taking literally 50% less damage. So it is very important to stop this. Anyway, that is the boss fight. He basically just repeats from here. We're gonna ignore the fact that I got stunned there, and that is that. Once the boss fight is over, there is some downtime here where you get to drop all of your trinket stacks. I don't think there's actually anything you can do about this. There's not really any mobs you can efficiently pull. After that, your friend will drop you a portal and you go into the next area. So this is like the Freehold area. Completely new mob set. In this pull, there are deckhands and watch out, don't get hit in the back. There are deckhands and tide sages. So the deckhands are just tank meleeing mobs. They have an ability called Super Saison, which everyone just calls Super Saiyan. It's a rage, but obviously don't expect your healer to be soothing any of them because there's 5 of them, so they obviously can't soothe all of them. I say healer, but really I meant druid or hunter or whatever. This pull is only dangerous for the tank. There are like these swirlies, but just dodge. They come from the tide sages. And the bolts do actually only go on the tank. A big part of this pull is managing when you can actually tank during Super Saison and when you cannot. Obviously, ideally, you want to never have to kite because then you can keep the pack stacked the whole time. If you kite, then these deckhands will chase you. The Tide Sages will not because they'll sit there casting. What you want to do, the way I've been playing this, is you cool down, like spend all your cooldowns every time they Super Season, like the first 1 or 2 rounds. After 1 or 2 rounds, then the Tide Sages should be dead and you can just kite them out, is usually how it goes. Also, obviously, there is probably some sort of interrupt scheme that people are doing on these Tide Sages, especially as a warrior. You can like coordinate to sync them up and reflect them. But yeah, once the Tide Sages are dead, you can kite. I think in this video, I'm playing Mountain Thane with like an execute build, so I'm trying to push execute instead of kiting him out. But yeah, once they've cast Super Saiyan, I'm not going to be tanking them anymore if there are no Tide Sages. They move on to the beach. Also, ideally, I think someone would start this beach RP beforehand. Once RP is started, this pack spawns, and these mobs all run to the middle, which makes grouping them all up easier. We did not do that, so I'm just going to start with this pull. I think I'm pinging here to say that I will like reflect these two. So playing warrior. This pull is kind of more the same, except there's these officers. These officers have been changed. They used to cast sword toss with a cast time, and it did a lot more damage. Now they just kind of spam it. Very similar to Hurl Glaive from Halls of Atonement. You do want to stay relatively spread out because sword toss does still bounce, but it just doesn't do that much damage now. So you don't care as much. This pull also does feature, if you pull double, it features triple Tide Sage and triple Deckhand, so their tank is in a little bit of danger. Technically, you could also pull the whole beach, in which case your tank would be in a lot of danger. But yeah, it's more of the same. Just make sure you have a somewhat decent interpretation on these. And also, in general, try to cool down through the first Super Saison. And then after that, the caster should be quite low the next time they cast it, and hopefully you can kite them out. Otherwise, you may need to use another set of cooldowns to survive it. One tactic you can also do if you're not pulling the whole beach is you can CC one of the Tide Sages and then bring it into this pull. Since there is no deckhands, there's very little tank pressure compared to the previous pulls, and even if 3 guys are just bolting you and you don't kick all of them, it's probably going to be fine as long as you're not tanking super saves and melees. Alright, once this pack dies, we move on to the next boss. So this boss is going to be extremely difficult in pugs. I recommend basically that everyone do exactly what we're doing. As you can see, we are all stacking on the edge of the room. That's because there's no timer for this. I think it technically is on a timer, but the add-ons just haven't updated yet since it's PTR. There is a timer for these cannon barrages, so you'll see in a sec. Well, I guess you'll see after this breath. So the first thing that happens is right before every other breath, 4 ad spawn from the ship that are fixating people. You cannot tank these melees as a non-tank, and they do fixate, so sometimes they think you get lucky and they fixate the tank. The mechanic is that you need to get rid of them with this breath. So you see how it works in here. In a sec here, we're going to show the breath. So you can see on Bigwigs, it's casting it in 0.2, but while he's doing this, you can still move the breath. And then after a certain amount of time, you can no longer move the breath. As soon as he starts this cast, Infinite Breath, it's no longer movable. So a mistake that I see a lot of non-tanks make is that they'll move while dodging the first part of the cast, while the tank is actually trying to position a breath, like to hit the mobs or give the group the most space. What you should actually do as a DPS or non-tank is dodge when he starts this cast. This is the most important thing. Also, this is the most annoying part of the fight here. You can see these circles from the cannon barrage. It is baited near players. And as I recall, this is taking up way more room, I think, than Shadowlands. In Shadowlands, you could just play like on the vertical axis over there. Now I think it is actually not possible to do that because it takes up the fire takes up way too much space. You do get 2 breaths per ad set, so it does 1 breath right after they spawn. Hopefully you hit all 4. And then the second one, if you hit all 4 with the first one, you can just miss or hit nothing, and then he's going to spawn ads again, you get another breath. There are also 2, during all this movement, there are 2 healing checks. So number 1 is Time Bomb, which we kind of glossed over at the start. We'll go back from the beginning and see it. Doesn't cast it at the very beginning. Time Bomb is in 3 seconds. So right after we dodge the first time. So you can see there's an anchor shot on the DK. This is not quite Time Bomb, no, we talked about, but it does just pick a random person, give them a dot, and drag them. So Time Bomb is the new mechanic. So he puts a dot on 2 players, you know, the classic, and then your healer has to dispel one of them. However, while you have this debuff, you have increased, I think it's increased haste. It might just be straight up increased damage, I don't really remember, but you are gaining damage when you have this debuff. But obviously, if you do not dispel any of them, it's called Time Bomb, right? So when it times out, it will explode. If 2 of them explode at the same time, you're probably going to die. So yeah, best strategy I usually is to dispel one of them, let the other one sit for a little bit, and then dispel it quickly. Usually that's basically just how it goes. You just dispel one and then dispel the other one later. I think technically you could slow roll dispelling the first one a little bit longer, but you know, don't expect most people to play around that. And that's kind of the fight. Well, you know, you'll notice we are kind of dropping poop along the edge here. The poop lasts until, I believe we recorded this, 150. 150 in the fight is when it goes away. As you can see, we are slowly moving across. Also, if you have if the breath is slightly off or people are like on opposite sides of the breath, it can be very hard to hit all of the ads. You know, AoE range CC, such as like Root Totem or like Ring of Frost or something. Abilities like that can be very useful here to help out your tank. Also random grips. Also DH tank is very useful for those. This second breath lines up at a very awkward time. You can see I'm just like intentionally pointing it very far away from the group. While we drop all this fire puddles and then move along the wall. Also, every time you move the boss, every shot is kind of like at a different angle with the breath. So you do have to kind of know every shot, I guess. We've done this dungeon so many times on PTR. But basically, there are 6, I think, breaths that are along the wall. Then we move them up along the side wall, and the angle changes a bit. Basically, every time you move the boss, the angle of the breath is going to be different since the ad spawns in the same place, but the boss is not in the same place. So be ready to adapt for that, I guess. Also, if you miss the first breath, which has not happened yet in this video, you do get the second breath, which I've just been aiming at the wall. to hit the remainder of the ads. And those ads you generally want to CC. Like, usually what would happen is like you would see this breath go off, which is the first one after the ad spawn. And if any are still alive, that's when you would try to start looking for CC, like Poly, Root Totem, etc. Generally, you want to save stuns. Since stuns do DR, you want to save stuns for right when the breath is actually shooting. That way you can guarantee that the ads are standing still during the breath. If you stun them beforehand, then it doesn't really do anything, right? Other than put them on stun DR, which makes the actual useful stun during the breath not work out. Since we're approaching 150 in the fight, in fact, we're past it, I do start moving the boss back towards our original spot. Have to aim at breath along the way. So basically, we just move all the way down until 150, and then we move all the way back. And then we can start from this wall and, play the boss fight from there. Basically, just completely reset all the fire. Obviously, it is a little bit more messy the second time around since you do have to start on the other side and move the boss all the way over. But hopefully he's low by then. This is a big reason that we lost this boss. There's a decent DPS check associated with it because the longer the boss fight takes, the more chaotic it gets, the more puddles become everywhere, the harder it is to hit the press on the ads, etc. It can quickly become very out of control, especially if people aren't baiting puddles properly. Alright, that is going to be this boss, and then once he dies, you get some downtime, and then you open a portal to the next area. So this area, I think, is mostly the same. We're actually shrouding past these Starseers into this pull. So there are three different types of mobs here. The Starseer is the main mob. It has two abilities. One is the frontal, which we'll see in a sec. Boom, frontal. As of the recording of this video, this frontal is still bugged. If the tank is not in melee, there is a decent chance that this frontal, it shows where it's supposed to go, and then it just goes wherever the tank is. So if I was standing like here, if it started shooting the frontal and I moved over here, there's a decent chance that it would just shoot over here instead of while showing the telegraph here. That apparently is a known bug that will be fixed soon, TM. Who knows when that is. All right, this is the next ability from the Starseer. It summons a wandering pulsar. And while this pulsar is alive, it is taking damage. You can see it has 68 million health compared to the mobs having like about like 500 million. So obviously just swap to it before it kills you. This is kind of where you run into the bug, by the way. If you run into this pulsar before the front, like while the frontal's shooting, then it can bug out. So that's all the mechanics this does, really. Basically just the healer / DPS check. Kill the pulsar before it kills you. Kill this before it spawns too many pulsars, etc. The things that have been changed are these accomplices. So they no longer cast Energy Slash and they no longer cast Reinvigorate. So Energy Slash used to be like a magical hit that gave you a debuff, which increased the damage you take from it. Now they just melee really hard. So there is still decent tank pressure from them, but you don't have to worry about debuffs or any stacking anything, and they just hit really hard. Also, there's this Ritualist, which has not really changed. It casts Hyperlight Bolt, which only goes on the tank. And Unstable Rift, which basically wipes the group. Do not let Unstable Rift go off. Bolt, try to kick as many as possible. But do make sure the Unstable Rift does not go off. And that's kind of the whole section. The only thing you need to worry about positioning-wise is make sure this Starseer, as you can see, he started over there, right? And we pulled him instantly over here. You don't want to tank it near other packs or other patrols, because there is a patrolling pack here, because it can spawn it spawns a star like close to where it is. And if it spawns a star, like you get bad RNG, let's say the star spawned over here, then we'd have to walk over to kill the star, and then the patrol would like accidentally aggro, and you wouldn't want that. So make sure you're careful about where you're taking the Starseers. One tactic we're doing here is we're CCing one caster, since there's way more Starseers to go through than casters. Unfortunately, it breaks, so we do end up fighting it, but you can CC one caster here and just play it later. And the rest is kind of just the same. As a tank, generally in these pulls, you want to be using your cooldowns when the star is out, or the pulsar is out. That's because your healer is going to be busy healing everyone else. They don't want to heal you. Also, you are technically taking extra damage from the pulsar along with everyone else, while getting like bolts and pretty strong melees from the accomplices. All right, and then we are going to pull 3 mobs into the last boss, Solia. This is the first ability that he does. He summons 2 assassins. So these assassins, the main thing you need to worry about them is aggro, honestly, as a tank. Ideally, I'd be moving on top of where one spawns and just getting aggravated instantly. But the way I'm doing it here is they run in. You can see they're actually running at people full speed, trying to kill them. Then I just clap once and I get aggro, but it is a little bit scary sometimes. They also teleport out and use Shuriken Blitz. If this goes off, it is almost certainly going to be a wipe. Make sure, there's nothing else to kick. Make sure ranged kicks are watching that. You can also use grip or something. If you stop it once, it will like go on cooldown and not cast again for apparently 18 seconds. So just make sure this doesn't kill everyone. This is the next ability, Collapsing Star. So this is slightly different from prior to the Sacred Flame. It does not work the same way. As you can see, our healer just ran into it. It knocks him back, and it gives everyone this debuff. If you run into it twice in a row, you'll get 2 stacks of this. So make sure, beforehand, people know who is doing the running in. If there's no coordination, you can like kind of stand next to it, like pre-position, and then see if anyone just like face first runs into it. If no one does, then you do it. That's kind of how I would do it in a pug. But in P1, our healer is doing the mechanic. One thing to be careful of is that the boss also has an unavoidable damage ability. I think it's called Hyperlight Spark. I guess I'm not tracking it on my bigwigs right now. But ideally, you are running into this and giving everyone a debuff. When they're not, you can actually see that Spark just did damage to us. When they are not, when the boss is not casting Hyperlight Spark, so you don't get overlap damage and overwhelm your healer. And that's basically P1. P1 is pretty simple. Just don't let the assassins kill everyone and make sure someone is doing the star mechanic. Once the boss hits 40%, we will phase into part 2. So he goes to the middle. Obviously, also, any damage that you do after this part is irrelevant because the boss is going to full heal. Boom, he ascends. Also, while he's in this form, he's immune to damage. So we're spreading out. You can see like these arrows. Basically, the mechanic is that the boss is going to shoot a line that like chains between all the players, and you need to hit all 5 stars with those lines. Technically, obviously there's 5 players, so everyone just walk to a star and then make sure your line goes through it. Call it a day. You can see it does damage, and it applies a stack. If someone messes up, then there's 5 players. So if one person misses, then he's going to do it again. And everyone's going to get 2 stacks, and if it stacks up, you can die to it. In fact, I would say if you miss once, it's already dangerous. Next, we're going to move the boss. I've been moving the boss here. You can also tank it on the stairs. But the idea is that you want to be a decent distance away from these stars because of this ability, Energy Fragmentation. You can see you just shot something. When this hits a star, and it's going to bounce between all 5 stars. It does this. If you're close to a star or like right on top of it, then obviously you're not going to be able to dodge this because it's going to shoot out instantly. But if you're further away, it is much easier to dodge. So that's why you bring the boss all to the corner here. And as we mentioned, you can bring it to the stairs, but some like star configurations, after he moves them, will put him right next to the stairs. So just make sure the boss is not near them. Hyperlight Nova, obviously don't be near them. One difficulty, by the way, in this phase of the boss is you can see he still does the collapsing star mechanic. This is the same as phase 1. Someone needs to run into it, otherwise it's going to explode and apply all the stacks. I believe there is technically a strategy where you just don't soak it and let them all go off and then just pop every raid cooldown you have to survive it. But the way we've been doing it is basically one person just goes out and hits the star 4 times or 3 times, calls it a day. We have the mage do it usually because mages have infinite mobility. And the mechanic is done. And that's basically this phase. You want to stay, as the tank, you want to be moving it away from the stars, and the stars do move around occasionally, so make sure you are actually away from them. Also, one mistake I make in this video is that once the last energy fragmentation of the phase is done, you do want to move the boss to the middle, because he teleports to the middle, and then there's 3 seconds until power overwhelming, which is when he goes immune, but these 3 seconds, basically the melee are losing uptime, so ideally you would move him to the middle, so you can keep hitting him during that 3 seconds after he teleports. The way I've been playing this phase, by the way, as a character with mobility, as a tank, I like slowly walk towards the star I want to go to, And then if someone like dashes in front of me to that star, then I can use my movement ability to adjust and go somewhere else. Ideally, though, they're all five are just a spawn like assigned, and people just go to their correct spot. But that is how I've been playing it. I've been like walking towards a star, like indicating that I want to go there. But if someone like goes there insta, then I can adapt. This Hyperlight Nova I have also been standing in with a decent amount of cooldowns. The boss doesn't really hurt the tanks too much. You need to watch out a little bit if the star, while this collapsing star is going off, because your healer will be busy. And you are going to be taking extra damage, but most of the time the boss doesn't really hurt, so you can use cooldowns kind of to stand in stuff. Also, the second star of the phase, for some reason, by the way, lines up with energy fragmentation. So if you're the person popping this, or collapsing energy rather, lines up with energy fragmentation. So if you're the person popping it, be very careful because it will be near one of the stars as they go off. And that's pretty much the whole boss fight, and that's the dungeon. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.